Here's the Presidential Traverse route again. Day 2 started right here in Sphinx Cove. That's where we made camp. We bypassed Mount Clay, summited Mount Washington, passed by the Lakes of the Cloud Hut, summited Mount Monroe, Mount Eisenhower, Mount Pierce. We then took this bypass to the Crawford Path, and we finished at the Highland Center. How do you prep for a trip like this? I used MIT Outing Club to find someone who had some kind of experience with this kind of a trip. I joined this club in order to gain winter experience. I used the mountaineering mailing list to find a partner. Donald Jang replied. When researching, the FKT site is pretty great. This site is used by trail runners competing with each other to try and set the fastest time on certain routes. They've collected together a lot of detailed information on a lot of great trails, not just to run, but to go hiking and backpacking on. Their page on the Presidential Traverse shows you what the proper route would be. There's also often lots of detailed information about the trail on the site. If you're looking for fun stuff to do, you can go to their routes page, look in the area that you're interested in exploring, United States, New Hampshire, and go through all the different routes that they have listed. You can find some mountain guide websites where they list information about doing a winter presidential traverse because, of course, it's probably one of the most serious expeditions that you can do in the Northeast. Guide services have information about it, suggested gear to take with you. Here's another guide service, useful information about what you might want to bring. Lastly is the weather. You want to make sure that you're not running into a deadly storm. And Mount Washington has an observatory on the top, and it gives detailed information about the current weather and the future weather conditions. And up to a week before you go, you should be checking this, validating that whatever other weather service you are using has numbers that at least somewhat match what the Mount Washington Weather Observatory is getting. If they don't, then whatever weather report you're using is not worth anything. A quick preview of the photos from our Presidential Traverse on Day 2. Day 2, Sunday, was a beautiful day, a bluebird day, almost no clouds in the sky. Practically the only cloud we saw was a standing cloud over Mount Washington, caused by Mount Washington itself. Unfortunately, it was also a very warm day, which meant I was overdressed, feel kind of annoyed that you're carrying all that extra weight that you didn't need. It also meant that the snow disappeared as the day went on. By the time we got into the late afternoon, there was hardly any left. This is the first picture of the day from the rock that overlooks our camp. The white cap of Mount Lafayette here shines prominently in the morning sun. Lincoln to its left, Moosilauke in the range behind it. The last range here, fading into the blue of the sky, 70 miles away, is the Green Mountain Range. There's Camel's Hump and Mount Mansfield. This is a picture from about the same spot, looking in the other direction towards the northwest. Here's the Carter Ridge. This is Moriah. Here's Mount Adams. This is the Chandler Ridge of Mount Washington, and we're looking into the Great Gulf. Now we have some good detail on the mountains in the far distance here. This is Sunday River Whitecap, part of the Grafton Notch Loop. The Appalachian Trail travels north along here and is mostly hidden by this crest here, but you can see this little bump here is the ski resort Sugarloaf, and this is Spalding Mountain. The AT crosses Spalding right there. Here I am, packing my bag to get going in the morning. This is a picture from Donald on top of the rock. This is a view just before our campsite goes out of the picture. We camped right in there. There's Jefferson behind us and Adams over here. Now you can see Madison poking out from behind Adams. Madison was obscured by Adams when we were at our campsite. Here's a close-up of where the campsite was. Now from the same location, looking at Mount Washington. This is the high point of the journey. Here's the Cog Railway. This is the path we were going to follow for the remainder of the journey. Mount Madison, Little Madison, Ben Franklin, Eisenhower, and Pierce is behind Eisenhower. This is Crawford Notch back here, where a lot of these white patches indicate why this is one of the popular places for ice climbing. There's a lot of steep, watery terrain here that freezes over the winter. Here's Donald Jong's panorama next to the Cog Railway. from the same spot. Picture of me standing on a rock with Mount Clay in the background. Mount Jefferson is behind me, and here is Mount Adams with Mount Sam Adams, a little dot right there. This is a panorama from the snowfield between Clay and Washington. Also, we can see this cool cloud here. This is a standing cloud. I believe it is some sort of a lenticular cloud or something similar to that, where it's caused by the air current rising over Mount Washington and then down. And when the air hits this one little spot, its pressure drops just enough that it drops below the dew point and the cloud forms. And then when the air falls over the mountain, actually the air is going this way, when the air falls over the mountain and starts going down again, goes below the dew point, and the cloud disappears. It's otherworldly to be here in late April while the flowers are blooming back home. There's Mount Kerrigan, the Pemi Range. This is the Dartmouth Range and the Cherry Mountains. Unfortunately, something's up with my camera and the panoramas do not have very good resolution. It's hard to see much detail on the mountains in the far distance. There is Madison, the first peak we crossed, then Adams, Jefferson, and Clay. From the same location, a more detailed shot of the Pemi Mountains. You can really see the differentiation between the two ridges, with the Franconia Ridge behind and the Bond through Twins Ridge in front of it, with the Moosilauke Ridge. Well, Moosilauke is maybe it's part of the Kinsman Ridge, another layer behind. There's Kerrigan, Tecumseh, the Osceolas, and the Hancocks. From further up the slope, we can see Clay, Jefferson, and Adams, Sam Adams. There are skiers down here preparing to go skiing. Not sure where they're planning to go because the view that we had from over here of this slope here makes it look extremely deadly. I guess maybe they're going to go on the other side of the ridge. Here I am hiking up Washington beside the Cog Railway. We actually saw the Cog Railway come up on this day. Behind me, you can barely see it, there's a guy in snowshoes. He was doing a single day traverse. He had left at 4 in the morning and had caught us now. We only left camp at 9. Here we are at the summit. Here's the summit panorama from Mount Washington. I would have expected this to be one of the nicer panorama or nicest panoramas, but unfortunately the quality of this picture is not super great. The resolution in the distance is not great. I don't know if it's the atmosphere or it's the sun or it's the quality of the camera or the shaking in the wind or something. For instance, you can see some distortion right there in that picture. Anyway, this is the Mount Washington Observatory here. And this is this visitor building, the Sherman Adams building. It's basically a mall inside here. We have skiers here who are about to go try and ski down Tuckerman Ravine. This is Donald. We have antennas. There are radio stations that broadcast up here, or at least they used to. I'm not sure if they still do. This is the Tip Top House. This was built in the 1850s. It was one of the first buildings up here. There were buildings that were built before this building, but they're gone, burnt down, destroyed by the wind. But this one, as you can tell, was created out of stone, so it's pretty hard to destroy this one. It doesn't burn. This deck here is for the Cog Railway, I believe. And then just down these stairs, you get to the Auto Road parking lot, right down there. This is the Attitash Ski Resort. When the conditions are perfect, somewhere down here, you should be able to see Mount Monadnock and Pack Monadnock and into Massachusetts. And then somewhere over here, you should be able to see the Atlantic Ocean. Unfortunately, we can't see that. This is what's called the Yankee Building with a pile of snow built up with me in the picture for scale. This building has to do with radio and television broadcasting that happens on the top of this mountain. As you can see, when you have a clear sky and there's less atmosphere above you, it gets really dark up at the top. It's this beautiful royal blue. You don't see that when you're in lower elevations with higher humidity. Here's another frost-covered building. This is the first lake in the Lakes of the Clouds, frozen over. This is a beautiful lake during the summer, crystal clear waters. Here's a view of Mount Monroe with the Lakes of the Clouds hut. There is me standing on that rock taking a picture up the mountain. Behind us is Mount Washington. This is North Twin in the background. Now this is a picture from Donald turning the other direction from the same spot, right next to the Lakes of the Clouds, looking up the slope back towards Washington. This is a panorama at Lakes of the Clouds hut. You can see the Lakes of the Clouds hut has snow up on it, so you can actually stand on top of it. Currently there are 2 people standing on it, and then other people eating lunch on the benches that are next to the hut. There's the Bretton Woods Ski Resort behind, North Twin, and as always you can see the Green Mountains in the far distance, the Dartmouth Ridge and the Cherry Mountains, Mount Wambeck in the Pliny Range, and Mount Cabot right there in the Pilot Range. Right back there, that's Jay Peak. This is Mount Mansfield and Camel's Hump. Here's a view of the hut covered in snow. This is Donald standing on the hut looking at Mount Washington. This is Mount Monroe as we're about to ascend. This is the peak of Mount Monroe. You can see the spike proving that it's the peak, and that's my feet. There's our selfie with Mount Washington in the background standing on top of Mount Monroe. This is a panorama from the summit of Mount Monroe. We can see here's Mount Washington, and there is Jefferson and Clay. Notice that there isn't really a ton of snow on this peak anymore. You can see already down at Eisenhower, there's still some snow. Notice what it looks like when we actually reach it. This is Little Monroe and Franklin, I believe, is that right there. And of course, we see the Pemmy Mountains in the distance, Lafayette, Lincoln, Liberty poking up underneath Moosilauke over the Bonds, Kerrigan, Osceola, and Tecumseh, and Hancock, Whiteface, Passaconaway, and the Tri-Pyramids. This is Oaks Gulf. Over here, Bigelow's Lawn. I believe this is the Boot Spur. On the other side of this ridge is the Gulf of Slides, and I believe this is the Gulf Peak, or that's the Gulf Peak, can't remember. This is the Dry River Wilderness that we're looking into. This little windy path down here is the Dry River. We're looking south down towards Massachusetts. Off in the distance, perhaps somewhere there is Mount Monadnock, many miles away. Notice in this picture how much snow was on Eisenhower and how much snow was on Monroe compared to when we were on Monroe. Now here we are on Eisenhower at 3 in the afternoon, and the snow is pretty much all gone because it was a very warm day. But it's an incredible view from the summit of Eisenhower. Unfortunately, the camera quality in this particular picture was not great. Possibly it has to do with the sun or the air quality, but probably just my camera was not acting great. There's Mount Clay, there's Jefferson. In between the two is where we made our camp and woke up this morning. This is the Ammonoosuc Ravine. Interestingly, everything north of this ridge flows into the Ammonoosuc River, which then flows into the Connecticut River, way over there somewhere, which flows down to Connecticut. Whereas everything south over here in the Dry River flows to the Saco. The Saco starts right around Crawford Notch here, and that flows into Maine. Here is Attitash here. I believe that is Mount Isolation. And we have the Boot Spur. That's Monroe. Looks kind of weird from this angle. Little Monroe, Mount Washington. Here's Mount Wambeck. That's Cabot and the Plinian Pilots. Cannot tell where Jay Peak. Oh, that's Jay Peak, 70 miles away. Actually, that's Jay Peak, and that's Big J. And then Mount Mansfield, Camel's Hump, North Twin, South Twin, Lafayette and Lincoln, etc. Tom Field and Wiley. Then I think this is Pierce and Webster and Jackson. And we're going to finish our journey right down here. I think actually the Highland Center is between Tom and Field. So right around here, I think. Here's our selfie from on top of Eisenhower, looking at Mount Washington. This is a beautiful still photo looking into the Dry River from the summit of Eisenhower. This is the Dry River down here, merging into the Saco. That's Mount Chicora. And this is Attitash. And you have Whiteface and Passaconaway and the Tri-Pyramids. It looks like spring now. This is from the summit of Pierce, Looking back towards Eisenhower, Washington, Boot Spur over here, Clay, and Jefferson. It's funny, the Mount Washington complex here makes kind of a three-pointed star. We're on one of the points, and we started on the other point, and we skipped this point here. But this one doesn't really get much credit for being mountains because it doesn't have much of an undulation to it. But this area over here is higher than the southern presidential mountains that we just walked along. Doesn't get as much credit, unfortunate for them. Here's our selfie from Pierce. Here's a panorama from the open spot just below the summit of Pierce. Over the summer, when I was hiking part of the AT, I sat on this rock and ate dinner and watched the sunset. There is Mount Jefferson and Clay, Eisenhower, Washington, Boot Spur. Maybe that's Isolation. I don't know. Mount Moat and Attitash. Here's an example of what the terrain was like. It's very rocky. When it's covered in snow, it's actually nicer, much more comfortable to walk on. But it's all of these paths are challenging because they're all uneven rocks. This is a sign on the Crawford Path as we're just about to finish the traverse. The Crawford Path is the oldest continuously used mountain trail in America. This sign you see at the beginning of the Crawford Path. It says, in 1819, Abel Crawford and his son Ethan Allen cleared this path to treeline near the top of Mount Clinton. Along this trail, the Crawfords guided many groups to the summit of Mount Washington. The trail was improved to a bridle path in 1840 with Abel, then 75 years old, making the first ascent of Mount Washington by horseback. By 1870, this historic path reverted to its original use as a footpath to the heights. Countless thousands have traveled this path to the Presidential Range and Mount Washington. This is the last picture of the day. This is a panorama at the Highland Center, which is where our trip ended. The Highland Center is essentially a hotel run by the AMC. It's a great place to use as the start or end point of any journey, especially if you want to sleep overnight. This is where we came out of the woods. This is the end point of the Crawford Notch. The presidentials are hidden behind these mountains here. This is Mount Webster, which is kind of part of the Presidential Ridge. This is Mount Willard, where we do a lot of ice climbing. Right down here is what's called Crawford Notch. This is the railroad station. There's a parking lot here, generally used as the starting point for a lot of trips. This is Mount Avalon. This is Field back here, one of the 4,000-foot peaks. And this is Tom, which I've been pointing to through all of the videos. Field, Tom, and Wiley's way back here. So that is it. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.